to the Detailer's Dock, anchoring you in the world of marine detailing. Whether you're a seasoned detailer or just starting out, this is where every detail matters, with your host, Captain Ken Mercer from Marine Detail Supply Company.
Hey, welcome back to the next episode of the Detailer's Dock. And I have one of my favorite guys in the boat world, the legend Frankie Marion from XPLOR Boatworks, and now Delta Boatworks as well. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, two brands now. So XPLOR's the custom side, and then Delta is our dealer, kind of our dealer network, dealer-based side.
I kind of know your history on how you got started, but I think it's a good one to share for everyone to kind of, understand your background on. You're not supposed to drop the
I'm not
camera.
My shotgun shell mic stand and battery and camera stand isn't the greatest. Sorry.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that you're from South Carolina.
Yeah.
For sure. So again, like I was saying before, you dropped your camera there. Share everyone out there kind of like the history on how XPLOR actually was created.
Yeah, so it started out as a film series that I wanted to do where you live off, your skill, or you live off the land kind of thing, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Did it with with Maverick Boat Groups as our partner for the first series, and it was awesome, and their boat was awesome. And when we got back, the main hindrance was our ability to carry enough things. And, a typical flats boat's pretty small, and I needed something that was a lot bigger. So for the next series, the next episode set, if you will, wanted to build a boat and reached out to a handful of custom guys to help build the boat, and ended up going with Harry Spear ended up helping me build the first boat for that film series for XPLOR project. Attempted to continue. Harry and I tried to put together a deal where we could work and build something together, and have a ton of respect for Harry, and think he's an incredible guy. We just went our separate ways. I wanted to do something, he wanted to do something, until we both went and did it. And
right,
I brought that boat back and cut the bottom off and redid it so that there was no, I'm not big on copying anybody. I want to do it the way that I want to do it. And so that's what we did, and built the first boat, and spent a year trying to get that right. And that was like in our initial X18.
Yeah, but where was that first boat built?
The first
garage?
Yeah, the initial layup was in the garage, and then went to Harry's shop in Panacea, Florida, and physically built the first hull, the hull that we used in the film series XPLOR project, and then brought that back to South Carolina, and then started cutting it up and rebuilding what is now XPLOR Boatworks. Testing a lot as far as, my background is much more offshore, big game stuff and bigger boats, and trying to apply some of those concepts or theories that I've acquired from fishing with a bunch of great guys, and putting it back into some smaller boats and some spray rail designs, and just been fortunate that, like, the redneck engineering that we do up here has worked. And that, like, the concepts are easy to grasp, I guess. I don't have a naval architecture degree or any of that. I've had some good guys on speed dial that I can call and say, hey, I'm getting this or this. What do you think?
Cool.
Yeah. So all my stuff started from, like, literally taking a boat, a hull that I thought was going to run right, going to the lake, running it, grinding half the bottom off, changing the strake design or the pad design or the lip design of it, and going back and failing just over and over and over and over. So you start to get if I do, if I did this and it does that and this does this, you start to put together this kind of series of if this then that kind of thing. And I don't know if that makes sense, but, like, if I add this, the boat lifts 2 inches, and I do that to the other, and then I start to combine all these things, it just gives you a roadmap to how to get to the performance end that you want to get to. And it's the most fun part of what we get to do is that portion of it, because you're constantly learning, you're constantly pushing an envelope of how to make this boat perform to a spec or parameter that we've aimed at. And mine's always been to do the most with the least. So the most speed, the most weight carrying, all that with the least amount of horsepower. Like, how do we get the bottom of the boat to really put us in a good position? And when you start with smaller boats like these flats boats in an 18-foot range or 17-foot range, I mean, that's without a doubt the hardest boat size to make run correctly every single time, because
like every little bit is going to make a huge difference, right?
if you put you're counting on a center of gravity point being remote, somewhat in the same area all the time, and the minute you go put cooler in front of the console, it shifts off, or the minute you fill a live well up in the back, it shifts that. That part has been really, really challenging. It's been tough to get figured out on a couple of trying to go fast, like trying to go 60 miles an hour over in some of these boats, where you have a horsepower cap. We're not going to go make an 18-foot flats boat and put a 300 on the back of it. You're having to work in a 115 and under frame just from a weight point, draft standpoint. It's been fun to do, and it's been something that I don't know if it's lost in boat building these days, but it's getting lost in the generation of guys that were tooling and plug building and all those things that really are the craft that comes with this. That skill set's not being passed down; it's being traded out for a computer. And I'm not trying to take away from these naval architects.
No. Yeah, no.
But I think there's something really special about building something from scratch by hand and it working and it having little imperfections and cues in it that come from people building it and not a machine building it. Because if we say we're boat manufacturers, that's one thing, but we're boat builders, I think it's a very different thing, in that we are building these concepts out and building these boats out.
Yeah, and I've personally seen it. I've been to your facility multiple times. You know that.
You've seen a lot of it coming
me
in different processes and parts of those steps too.
Yeah, and I've been to other boat manufacturers myself too, and witnessed the difference. And I've seen you grow in that short term where there was just a few people that were working and building boats. And now, how many people do you have working for you now, roughly?
We've got about 40 employees right now.
Right, and I think when we first met, it was probably half that. I would think
it was way less than that. I mean, when you're trying to design these things, you're trying to work on some sort of scalability of how do I make one and then how do I make two, or how do we make two at a time? You can't do this. You can't do this by yourself. It takes a team of guys that are committed to the same value proposition that you are to make these things happen. And and it's and every one of these things is like a process of failure. From designing the first boat and it not working right to the next evolution. Of you getting closer and closer and closer and closer, but there's not really ever I'm always wanting to change something once it's close. I mean, you wrote on that first boat, the first hull of that that we brought down there 5 or 6 months ago. There's always this, and we're playing with like tiny little things at this point, but that's what makes it fun. And I think when you go to look at, how do you go build something? If you and I are building something and I've got to, I'm going to do step one, you're going to do step two. That's a pretty easy proposition to say, well, I know Ken has the same value set that I do, and I trust that he's going to do the same job that I'm going to do. So it's easy for me to do step one, you do step two, and we put a product that showcases our commitment level to quality going forward. Well, when you need a helper and I need a helper, that whole value proposition has changed, because these people are coming in after the founding of this. They're coming in after the process and the product has been established and set. And so there's a time period and a personnel cycle that you have to go through to start to assemble a team of people that organically buy into the plan and the quality proposition that we're trying to do as a brand. I can't go out there and say, we're building a XPLOR Delta boat and it's got to be awesome because this, and this. Like, those are my reasons. Right.
So what would you say, like, I think I know, but what would you say that really separates you guys the most? Because if I'm not mistaken, like, you are like, you vacuum infuse pretty much everything, correct? And if you wouldn't mind, like, for the people that are out there that are listening, like, explain the difference of infusion and then, regular hand wave. What, like, are the benefits or disadvantages? Because I'm sure there's some negatives that are probably there. Obviously, the positives are going to outweigh the negatives because that's why you do it. And if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Even the newer Delta line is also manufactured the same way, but they're able to get like a premium boat at more of like a budget price. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll go into some of and let me answer the first part of that first, and then I'll get into our internal branding stuff on that second. But there's plenty of boats out there that are all hand laid and chopper gun oriented that are fantastic boats that are made by extremely skilled craftsmen and women that are really, really good at what they do. Thing that I ran into when I started is I didn't have experience running a chopper gun, and so it
Right.
was intimidating that you go into this, this $15,000 piece of equipment, and if you don't know how to use it, you can destroy it very quickly. And
Mhm.
some of the people that I had working for me initially that were running chopper guns for me, were running a wet out gun, it's the same piece of equipment for the most part. They were not guys that were going to be long-term guys with me. They weren't, they were, they just weren't great. They didn't work out, say it. And
Right.
so I think the main reason and why we chose to go a route of 100% vacuum infusion,
Right.
there were a couple of components to it. One was the ability to ensure the same finish and the same fit over and over and over again, because, like I said, building these smaller boats, making sure that they're the easiest way to make sure that you got it right is do it the same every single.
Right.
And
Consistency.
we don't have like 2 or 3 pounds or 10 pounds of material here or there that would throw any of this stuff off. And so that was one big reason. The two, it let our gaps for fitment come way down. Like most guys are going to be 1/2 inch all the way around to 3/4 of an inch all the way around. We could get to like 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch to where we're using less putty, less weight, stronger bond. When you get into some of these methaccolates, the thinner it is, the stronger it is. And
Right.
so just trying to kind of chase some of that stuff down. And then from a personnel standpoint, I can teach anybody how to do infusion. And especially, I say that for the way that we do it and
Right.
our laminate schedule. So it also made it to where I could just start looking for really good people that wanted to come in and build something special with us, as opposed to having really good boat building people, because it just made our net a little bit bigger as far as who we could get for employees, who we could get to come on, how we could teach those people, and then let them run with some of that. And once we kind of gave them the concepts and did a handful of infusions with them, and we're doing between anywhere from 8 to 15 infusions a day here, which is not a terrible ton, but we're moving.
That's small parts, holes.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing we don't infuse right now is our consoles, just because the geometry of that is really tricky to bag, and we probably move to a light RTM setup for that in the future. And then our live well boxes, just because from a speed standpoint, where those aren't as critical from a weight standpoint, we can handle those pretty easily. But every hull, every liner, every cap, every hardtop, every hatch lid, everything else is all fully infused.
How many models do you currently manufacture now? So tell me how many underneath the Explorer and then how many underneath the
XPLOR, we have the
Delta line.
X24, the Explorer's the X24, X7, X13. The 7 and 13 are both carbon fiber boats. And under Delta, we have the D18, the D245, and then we've got a Q2 next year that's a little bit bigger on that Delta side.
You've shared that with me, but we'll keep it between us. They're going to have to stick around and follow you and follow us to find out what that new model is going to be here eventually. But I'm sure everyone out there that's listening and watching is going to be excited, because I was excited on the 245, and I've been blessed for you to share with me already what's coming. So I'm excited to see what
Yeah, I
you
mean,
guys deliver.
and not to shamelessly plug your stuff, but like, the stuff that Starke makes and the stuff you've helped us become more versed in and kind of understand the concepts of what you're doing have made a lot of those things easier for us, and taking some of those steps out of, the making a boat beautiful is not, you hope it's coming right out of the mold.
Yeah.
But,
Which
as
is
you,
never the case. That
I
no
don't know.
matter the manufacturer, man.
No, I know I'm with you. And we spent a lot of time especially on the 245 plug,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that we did everything that we would do for like a final production boat to the mold, as opposed to trying to stop and redo it to the plug
Right.
and then do less to the mold. Whereas in previous boats, it's been like, hey, let's get the whole plug to, to 320 or 400, and then we'll take the mold the rest of the way to, 1500 wet, buff, all that stuff. And so we did we shot the whole boat in black gel coat,
Yeah.
so that we could really see where our lines are. Cause we build all of our plugs out of MDF and Bondo and resin coat them and prime and all that stuff. So you have a lot of opportunity for seams to print and things like that.
Right.
And doing it that way with the black gel coat and taking and going through and using a lot of y'all's products to really buff and show off any imperfections that we had, and then go back and fix them. And the good thing about the blacks, you can, when you fix it, you can also
Shows
see
everything.
you can see the fix too, which is great, because then you can go make sure that all those areas that you saw are wrong are now correct. So, and that infusion process, and again, I keep harping back on the failure of things, because that is it's a huge driver of change, is seeing that problem arise and then having to progress through that and fix that problem, and having an idea that you think works and it doesn't work, and do it again. And so going through and building these hulls like that, where you build them and you run them and you fix them and run them and over 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 again, until you get it where it's right to send it out into the world. That's where the innate knowledge and understanding of our product, that feel like gives us a really distinct edge of what we do, is that we go through those processes of failure and we go have a theory that doesn't work. And it's not for everybody. It's hard. I mean, and I don't mean like it doesn't work, but it's like mentally
Yeah.
taxing to go through, and you get so excited and everything's pointing that this should work, and it doesn't. So yeah, there's a lot of that comes into every step of this along the way, from the design to what you think the laminate schedule would be, from skin coat thicknesses to laminate selection to how they're going in the boat, cosmetic print, eliminating cosmetic print, heat signatures, recatalyzation, different layers through the infusion process. Because that's one of the things that I think is the hardest part to get over is, when you're hand laying something, you're putting a layer down, it dries, kicks, sanded, next layer, over and
Right.
repeated throughout what your laminate schedule is. Whereas with infusion, we're taking and putting all those layers in one shot.
You still do a skin coat though, right? With like a chopper gun?
Yeah. We still do a
That's
skin
still
coat.
normal, right? Yeah.
There's been a ton of people like online talking about how terrible it is, and that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. As far as a chopper gun being this horrible it's one of the greatest pieces of equipment you
Yeah.
can have in this, because there's hand laying chop strand mat is great, but there's adhesives in that fiberglass that, as it kicks, shrinks, and it induces a lot of opportunities for air to get into those layers, which as a chopper gun, you can see those when you're rolling out, letting out. So I think it comes down to the person applying that process. And I think that's the thing that is the hardest part about what we do, is that all of our machines are humans, and we can't count on the consistency gap is about here. It depends
Yeah.
on what it is. Versus a machine doing it, you can dial it in and have it do the same thing every single. But I think that's also what makes what we do so amazing. And I say we, being building a boat for any boat building person. You created this form and you go reproduce it over and over. And the goal is to like make the same thing over and over, make your mold over and over. And,
Right.
if you can make sure that you have the right people that take care of things and check things, that go through and handle it like it's theirs all the time, you're going to get a lot of life out of those parts. And that's what's going to make the finished parts that we're trying to get out the best that they can possibly be.
So speaking of finish, let's kind of like segue into Gelcoat, where I think, a lot of the listeners out here are, marine detailers, right? So obviously the Gelcoat that you and your team use on your boats, like explain maybe why you're choosing, and then you don't have to give any specifics on the brand, but why you choose that one, and then talk about, kind of like some things that, a detailer or a boat owner should if they see it, and these may not be present on your boat because like there's pinholes, right? I'm sure you're familiar with what pinholes are, right? If you wouldn't mind in your own words, kind of explain what they're seeing there or why that happened as well.
Yeah.
So just
So
kind of
start with the first part. We're really fortunate to be geographically located inside a lot of major monster boat builders in this industry. We get a lot of product put in front of us that some people might not get that weren't. We have Sea Hunt, Sea Pro, Tidewater, Sportsman. It's got like all these guys within 60, 80 miles of where.
big
Yeah,
time like
yeah,
production guys.
yeah, the pillars of this industry, which is incredible to have those guys so close, and they've been everybody that I mentioned in that list has been extremely supportive of me and helped me get to what we're doing right now, and couldn't have gotten here without a lot of those guys. But we have tended to lean towards, from a production gel coat standpoint, availability is huge. Obviously, if you can't get your white and you have to change, that's a massive change. So we tend to follow what some of these guys locally are using as far as brands and colors, because it means that we're constantly going to have availability to that. And if I run out of
Which makes sense.
Run around the corner and get 10 more gallons. And we've only had one brand of gel coat that we didn't like a couple of the colors, the way that they turned out. And that's the only reason we don't use them anymore. But as far as the porosity that you're talking about, which is those pinholes, a lot of that comes from the application process that the gel coater, how he's spraying the mold. And there's a lot of these guys that don't understand the way that gel coat catalyzes and kicks is very different than paint. It's completely different.
Yep.
And so the way that you apply it to the mold matters, and the route that you go to put it in the mold matters, because there's a styrene evacuation process that happens in gel coat that's what causes it to cure, is the release of styrene. And that's why it's temperature driven, but it's not always temperature driven. Like we have days like today, it's 42 degrees up here today, and we're still spraying gel coat today with no heat. You just need airflow. So airflow can do the same thing that heat can. It's a little bit longer, but the removal of styrene accelerates the curing process. I got ahead of myself.
No, I mean, here's the thing is like, Frankie, this is what I want you to cover, because like these questions come up all the time when we're holding training classes, anything like that. They're like, well, what are these pinholes, or why is this gel coat have more clarity than the other one? And I think for those that are out there that are listening, it's going to be beneficial, because as detailers, a lot of times these guys and gals are chasing perfection. And as you know, like gel coat's a different animal than paint, right? So
and they're not going to be able to get perfection out of it if it wasn't handled properly on our end. It's if like
right. And that's where I'm going with that, Frankie. So if you can share that info, because if these guys and gals are more informed when they have that conversation with their customer that they're detailing the boat, then they can understand it better. Not the detailer, but the customer when they explain it, because they're educated on what's going on versus I'm not really sure, is a lot of times their answer.
Yeah. So when you have gel coats, then you have resins, you have a cure package that is the chemistry, the chemical package inside that when mixed with an MEK or peroxide catalyst is going to start the hardening process of that material. And it's floating, so it'll settle in a drum. So if a drum's not agitated really well or stirred up well and then allowed to resettle a little bit, you'll have changes in the heat signature and the time that the gel coat takes to catalyze. So like if you're running white, for example, and you didn't go stir the white for 10, 15 minutes before you start spraying, and then let it rest for 10 or 15 minutes, so you start spraying. If you look at this drum, you may have like all of your cure package may be in the middle as far as like settling back out and evenly distributing. So we're pulling from the bottom of the drum. So what we put on first might not be curing as fast as what's going on second and third layer, from 0 to 10 mils of gel coat, 10 to 20 to 20 to 28. Like you may have a different cure package in there if the stuff isn't so you may get a little faster kick out of the front of the boat or this part of the boat that may cause a different in a perfection level of cosmetics. I'm not saying like 20 yards away looking at the boat, being able to see some of this stuff. I mean, I think the curse of this.
They all look good from my house, by the way, Frankie, just so you know that.
Yeah, no, I know. I've seen your drop. But I think the thing is like the curse of this is that you start to see these imperfections.
Yeah.
Is the curse of what we do and what the guys listen to this interview are seeing is they are starting to see all of these problems, and the customer's not seeing some of these problems. Thankfully, like I wish I didn't see half these problems because I see them everywhere, and a lot of it's impossible to get everything
Right.
like perfect from be a 4200 line or a porosity and Gelcoat or haziness or any of this stuff. Like there's a ton of it that it's constant pursuit that you're never going to get to that you're aiming for, which is a really tough position to put yourself. But when it comes down to those guys looking and saying, okay, this part of the boat has a bunch of porosity in it. Okay, you mentioned the pinholes and stuff. That's what that is.
Yep.
Porosity.
Gassing out, basically.
Yeah, and it's the styrene removal moving through. So if you have to look
So would you say that's generally more using too much styrene in the mix is what's causing it, or they're laying the gel coat too thick?
It's how it's being applied. Just so you guys understand how gel coat cures and why it does like it is, it's going to cure bottom side up. So the part you're spraying in the mold, that's going to cure first, and the kick is going to continue to the outside, and it's going to be prolonged it's going to take about 6 days if it's not sealed. So if you've sprayed gel coat without wax or cure package or anything like that in it, and you take a rag with acetone and you can wipe it on it and you get color on the rag, it is still chemically ready to receive another layer on top of it. Okay. So the reason that these guys and a lot of your guys that are shooting gel coat and fixes are putting wax in it is because the styrene pushes the wax to the top, and the wax seals the gel coat off, which allows it to fully kick.
Gotcha.
Right? Like when they're putting like a I'm trying to think of what it's called, the patch aids or air wax, liquid wax in there. When it's done, it'll have a waxy feel on top of it because that styrene has pushed all the wax to the top of the gel coat, sealing it off so that it can fully cure. And as a finisher, as a time of repairing this stuff, the reason that you add that is to accelerate that time so you aren't having to wait 3 or 4 or 5 days for this stuff to fully kick off because it'll jam sandpaper. I'm sure half these guys that have seen it out there when they sprayed something to paint and hadn't put enough wax in it or enough cure package in it, and they go to sand it and it just gums their DA up or something like that.
Their pad
their pads up. And that's because either one, they didn't put enough wax in it, or it didn't sit long enough to where it could seal off. So that's understanding that process of how, from our side of the table on the manufacturing side, we need that outer layer to stay open chemically. So we're looking for a chemical and a mechanical bond when we're making these things. Like we want to create one monolithic DNA structure when we're finished at this boat. So we spray the gel coat and we need it to cure bottom side up so that when we lay the skin coat on, there's open chemistry that allows those two to seal. And then the fiberglass cures in the same way. It's going to cure that same way out, which is why you smell styrene in all these boat plants, because all of that's evacuating from this chemistry happening. So for those guys to understand that, and I wanted to hit on that just because people that are painting all grip or all craft or any of this paint, it's a very different process to do that versus fixing gel coat.
Right.
Understanding how it's made, I hope maybe it'll help some of these guys understand or explain to these customers why they may be seeing this problem. So in saying that, porosity. So porosity is going to come from improper application of the gel coat in the mold. And it happens to every single boat company out there.
Yes, it does. Yep.
Now, I can't tell you how many places I've been into where I'm watching their guys paint and they're just back there like this, like covering the mold like you would paint a car. Like you'd miss the car and you cover it and then the paint would settle. That's not how this works. You have to have a route that you go through, and I do it before, and I've still paint plenty of our molds, where you have to kind of know how you're going to navigate the areas that are hard to reach so that you are continually chasing a wet line. The problem that you have with porosity is you have something that you sprayed over and it gets another layer put on it too quickly. So it seals off and does not let the styrene come up. And what it does is it pushes the gel coat and lifts it in tiny little holes. So from our end, if we've got a hole flipped up on the side, right? So we got gantry flipped over, so we're shooting them sideways. Your chines and your edges are going to be the places that are going to be take the most tactic to ensure paint coverage, right? Because you've got to change a delineation of surface and all that stuff.
Is it generally thicker there?
It can be, and that's what I'm going to get into next on some of this process. And all of this comes, a lot of the problems that we're going to talk about are going to come from this step. And this is being done incorrectly. You'll see what you want to do is you want to start when you're spraying a mold, you start on a chine. And to this day, we're going to take the bottom corner, the turn from the bottom to the gunnel of the boat. And we're going to come down that, and we're going to get up the bow, and then we're going to come back down the middle, and we're going to come up the chine, and we're going to come up the other chine and up the side. And then we're going to start to come back and fill in. So any of these places where you have, a change in this kind of shape, like a chine shape or something like that, making sure that you get coverage there, because we're looking for, on this first pass, we're looking for 10 to 12 mils of paint. And any of these guys doing it, my guys made sure they do this. There's somebody behind them going with a mil gauge, checking all this the whole way through to make sure that we're not stacking too much paint.
And what's that? Just like a little metal piece that has like a the thickness on it, and they just kind of
poking it in to make sure that we don't have too much. And I say all this, like, I'm not saying any of this from an elite standpoint, like from a down my nose standpoint. Like, I have screwed up more gel coat and more boat holes and thrown more shit in the trash can than any of your guys that are listening to this thing. So this is a process that I've learned from screwing it up a lot.
From making mistakes, kind of like what you were talking about building the boats in general.
I just want to make sure, like, these guys aren't taking this as me saying, like, not some high and mighty thing. I'm telling you this from having to fix everything that they're having to fix on a daily basis. Here. So you get that 10 mil to 12 mils down and you cover the boat. And then you rest, you stop for 5 minutes, and you let that stuff gas off. And you let it breathe a little bit. And what that does is it lets that initial styrene, like that, it's coming through that 10 mils, get out. And once it's getting out, then you come back and you work opposite on your way back, right? So we got linear, or we got parallel, then we got perpendicular, and then we come back with parallel. And then once you get to that 22, 23 mils, you can start to mill gauge and fill in areas, right? So if we take it, we know, there's going to be certain areas, and this will lead me into stress cracks, which is where I wanted to go with this, if you're good with that.
Yep. Oh, please.
Coming into this, because this is, I'm not a certified expert on this. I'm giving you all of these from Redneck Engineer.
Based on your experience.
That's how this works. So let's say we're going through that method, right? We're starting at the back. We're coming up to the bow, coming back up to the bow. Well, unless your boat is squared on the bow, most of them are going to be V entry. So that entry point is going to be a huge candidate to receive a lot more gel coat than it probably should. So if somebody's not really paying attention, because we're sweeping through it so much, and our guns shoot the fan, right? So our fan's overlapping, but as we get to the bow, if we're shooting a 3-foot fan, there's only many places it can go that it's not going there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So being cognizant of that, making sure that you check that over and over, which is a hard thing to do. I mean, all of these things, we're dealing with people doing this job. This is not a machine doing this job. So it's something that there's a lot of tolerance as to come with these expectations from our side of the table.
Yeah, because you could shoot too much gel coat too.
1,000,
too thin and too much.
Correct. And your too thin is probably the better case scenario, because, and let me
for the detailer that's going to buff an oxidized boat later down the road.
But it is. From a consumer standpoint, the thin paint side shows itself because it rosette, and you see it when it comes out of the mold. And when we find it here, it's easy for us to fix, because we have all the paint that just came out of the gun, that's the same batch. We have all of these things that are very consistent. If we're shooting a medium gray and we have to patch that, we have the exact same medium gray from the same batch, from the same line, from the same drum.
Right.
So our fixes can be a lot easier to do versus one of your guys in the field going, hey, this is a KO 23 gray that I need to order. Well, that shit's way from the color it is. And now you get into this blending and having to paint something, that spot that's this big has to be painted
Yeah.
that big to where you don't see it. So the thick parts of Gelcoat where it's coming in and being sprayed like that, it takes the gun operator's understanding of, and I think that's the biggest problem in our side of things is there's so much turnover in those positions that they don't get a chance to really fail enough to figure out why they should be doing it this way. They have something in their head and somebody's told them this, and this is how I'm going to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a pride factor involved. And it's not an understanding. And a big part of our teaching here is trying to get everybody here to understand why. Because if we can get them to understand why, then they can be positive elements to problem solving for us when we do encounter a problem. Because they then understand every reason why we're doing this stuff. So anyway, that's where you see the porosity come from. I don't know, maybe picks in on this shit and that goes all over the place.
Squirrel.
Yeah. But that's where you're going to see porosity come from, is from improper Gelcoat application when the time that the hull was made. And it happens a lot. And you also will see it if the cure package starts to separate in gel. You start to see it when colors start to set. So if you're shooting a really dark color and it's been sitting a while and then it agitated, you'll start to see that chemistry not be consistent across the entire drum, and you'll get spots and pockets that cause this porosity, which is styrene's inability to get out of the gel.
So is that maybe why before in the past, because I think there's been like a real popular color, at least cap wise here in the recent 5 years, like, you have guys that are using like a gray or a darker gray on their top caps now. And have you seen where, and maybe you haven't experienced it, which is great for you guys, but I've seen it before in a lot of these boats that have that gray color where it kind of looks yellowish after a while on the, towards the edges and such like that. Is that, what you're talking about?
No, I think that comes from just chemistry and UV stabilization. That's really, really hard to do in a color that's absorbing so much heat all the time. I mean, the sun and salt water, throw those two in together and you got a pretty, device cocktail when it comes to messing things up.
That's why you need to ceramic coat your boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I don't know that I think that the yellowing and stuff is mainly, I think you could probably speak to that a little bit more, that you could avoid that with ceramic coating, with waxing the boat, with making sure that it's kept clean and not sitting for a long time. But when it comes to the pinhole stuff and some of the hazing and some of the, it's all chemistry. Like we're doing a math problem that has this many answers. And when you try to start putting in other things and to change the answer, it's just wrong. It's not that it's, 2 + 2 = 4 every day and Sunday, not, 3 days a week. And when you start to work in the chemistry side of things, which is the great what we do, that if you do your chemistry right, it should be right. It should be the same every single time. The problem is, again, our machines are human. Go to these people did they get the best sleep they had every night? Did they go to bed and eat a great dinner? Did they, all of these things go into someone's ability to perform a task consistently every single day. And none of us are that good at it.
Yeah. So talk about stress tracks. You were going to go there with stress tracks too, right?
So as you're going through, and that, hoping your guys can understand and visualize this concept of this part getting sprayed. And so we'll take it into a liner, right? A liner, or for 2-piece boats for a cap and liner setup. You've got this thing flipped over upside down and you're shooting the top, right? Are you with me? You're spraying the top of the liner, right? So when I'm doing this, I'm going from one side to the other. So this radius that I'm standing beside is getting hit once, twice. Before I've even started shooting this side of the boat, it's getting pain.
Okay.
3, 4, 5, 6. As I get to a corner in the back of the boat, which is where you guys probably see 95% of stress cracks in a boat, now I'm working around spraying it. So now I'm 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time that I'm done, and I've got 26 to 28 mils of paint on the flat parts that I'm painting, those corners have got 35 to 40 mils of paint on, because they've been dusted over and over and over and over and over again. So
that's because it's too thick, essentially?
Yes. It's too thick, and Gelcoat does not have the flexibility that fiberglass has. From a real molecular standpoint, like, it can't move. once it gets past about 30 mils, it can't flex with fiberglass.
Okay.
So that's why you're seeing these boats and these impact points in the front corners of the liner, rear corners of the liner. The joint is always going to be in a joint. It's very, very rare that it's in a flat spot in a boat naturally. You may have it in a flat spot in the boat where somebody ran a screw in too far underneath that flexed.
Right.
But it all comes back to Gelcoat's inability to flex once it gets past a certain millage. So that's where your guys need to understand too. And I think it can help them to keep the customer from going off a ledge thinking their boat is like structurally screwed. And that when they see stress cracks and stuff like that's in the corner, it's 100% cosmetic.
Yeah, it's not the fiberglass cracking.
It's a sand out, repaint, and you're probably good. And honestly, I would tell those guys if they're repainting some of those to probably sand a little bit more in those areas to try to reduce the amount of millage in the Gelcoat that's going to be on there, because they're going to be putting more back.
Because they're going to put more back on it. That's right. I didn't think about that.
So, you got it here and it's 30 mils and you're going to sand off 10 and then you're going to put 20 back where you're just going to have the problem come back.
The same issue again. And, the other areas I see, stress cracks too is, where areas are bolted, like hinges, latches, areas like that. And I'm assuming that's because when that area is getting bolted down, it's flexing, right? Which is
correct.
Or even loose parts will cause.
Or you can have it happen where, and again, this is stuff that we all deal with and we all have these problems. You're putting a set of hinges in and your guys are running a screw in and they don't get the exact pilot hole drilled out and they don't reverse bend their drill bit before they drill it in there. There's a handful of techniques you can do to really minimize that. Is it something that happens every single time? It would be awesome if it did, but it doesn't. It's all in Gelcoat. All of that cracking is Gelcoat's inability to flex, because I would bet everything I'm sitting around here that any of your guys get into their stress cracks, if they could take a look at the bottom side of what they're fixing. So if they're fixing the top deck, they can look at there's zero cracks. Like there's no cracks in the fiberglass. All the cracking is because this paint has got so much paint on it and it's really rigid. And then we've put it in an area that is going to flex, whether that be in a corner, a bow corner, a screw that's gone in that's put a little bit of upward pressure on it, and then we've started a crack at the screw hole that, we crack the Gelcoat when we punch a hole through it incorrectly, and then we run a screw in it and put a little bit of tension on it. And the next feet, the waves riding on the trailer, it just stresses that crack out, and you start to see that more. And my only suggestion to your guys would be to, one, hopefully half the shit that's come out of my mouth made some sense, but that second half is that you can explain to your customer with like authority that they don't need to worry about this being a massive problem with their boat, that this happens and it happens to a lot of people and it's not a big deal and they can fix it real quick.
Yeah. And like you touched on, every manufacturer, I've been in some of the top billing badass OEMs, and they all have the same issue. I don't care. Everybody.
I'm not saying it's on every boat, and hopefully it's on very few boats. Hopefully it's on very few of them. But I can tell you that how the parts are handled, like, if typically you're pulling your hulls, right, and you're setting them on a dolly, then you're taking and you're picking your cap up from 2 points. So it's coming in like this and going down on it. I mean, all of those changes induce an opportunity of crack happening. We have on our B18s, there's a hatch drain in the front hatch that it's a weak point. It doesn't get any core. It's just straight glass. Every part of the rest of the boat's cored. So the whole rest of the boat's really stiff and it's got this flex point. And if we don't pick that boat up absolutely correctly, in 2 days, there's a stress crack in that gap, which we end up fixing here, obviously. But all of these things of taking and asking something that's not supposed to flex is where you're going to run into a problem. And I think if your guys are out there in the field looking, especially if they're going to a customer's boat and the guy's asking them to take another look and see if they see anything else, I would have that in the back of my head, that think of where the boat may have flexed when they're putting it together. Think about where screws have gone in and may have gone errant. And you can get ahead of a lot of those things and save the customer some pain down the road, or you having to go back and refix something again. And they understanding that process about how these boats are put together and how they're made.
And so kind of like, let's kind of like finalize where I kind of want to commend you and the XPLOR Boatworks team of kind of being open-minded when it comes to changing the way you finish boats, right? So I think you would agree, you've been building boats for a long time, and there's, that old school mentality of, rotary, heavy cut, buff it, get it out the door, right? And you invited me up to the factory, and we kind of discussed about how to do, a modern way of finishing boats. And if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to go in specifics, but just kind of touch base on what is done for your brand, at least, or the way the boats are coming out with your team.
Yeah.
And
if
you don't mind.
I challenge anybody that's in any business to find something that like time on process and evolution and change the way you do things. There's people that do things the way they did them 100 years ago. That's not the way we do it. We have to look at, we're trying to produce a product for a set amount of money and a set amount of range, and hopefully be of value to our customers in that end result. And a big portion of what we're doing is labor driven and time driven. We're not talking about $100 here and there. We're talking about, $50,000 to $100,000 here and there. And we're not a big boat builder.
Yeah. Right.
So being able to come in there and say, I think one, it goes back to the foundational mindset from an employer standpoint of making sure that the people that work with you have the freedom to question a process,
Mm-hmm.
and two, have the understanding and the education of the processes they're doing so that they can be assets to your problem solving. If you don't have that, you're never going to be able to introduce something new into a manufacturing process. If you don't have guys that understand, and I don't just mean from a chemistry or a buffing standpoint, I mean from like a financial standpoint, from a business overall global health standpoint, that like, look, here's the amount of time that we have allocated in our production process for this finishing step to happen. All right. And let's say it's 4 hours. And that 4 hours, if we have 4 people doing it at $30 an hour, so it's $120 an hour of time every day.
Times 4.
Right. That we're going to be paying for this process to be done. Everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to further themselves. So if you can go to those guys and say, hey, if we can find a process, we can find a product, we can find a material, we can find something that's going to eliminate one of those out. That's $120 times 5. And I'm pretty good at math, but I can't do that in my head. But if you said you do that over the course of the year, you're not talking about $500. You're talking about the ability to offer health insurance for your employees, the ability to give that whole crew an extra week of paid vacation. And I think when you can start to get, and that's what we've tried to do here, is have our people think like that say that, in that time that you're doing this, here's the math. Here's on a spreadsheet what I have budgeted for our production cost here. If we can save it, we have a bunch of options of what we can do. We can sell a product for less money and be a better value and hopefully sell more. We can make more money as a company. We can redistribute that money back to our employees. So if you plant that seed with your team and you honestly do it, like I hear people say, I want you to feel like you're part of something here. Like, it's the biggest load of bullshit that anybody's ever said. Like, you should be here. You shouldn't feel like it. You should be it. And if you can be it, then all of a sudden you have this organic demand that starts to happen, and you start to be open to other people coming in and telling you how to do stuff. And a big part of what we've had to do here is, one, understand that as a team, we are trying to get a product out the door as perfect as we can. And I think your guys will understand that. And the guys the guys that are working on a team, that's the goal. The goal is for our customer to be a QC person, for them not to have to be that department.
Exactly.
The goal is for us internally to do it so well that they don't have to worry about that. When we invite the customer to be a QC department, the wheels fall. Like it goes, hey, right?
Man, it's so not just, I got to stop you right there because you're so right. Like, like we work with other OEMs too, and not just you, but you guys, entrusted in us 2 years ago. And that's one thing I tell them. It's like, if you can eliminate a lot of those imperfections, they're going to stop looking. And if they find issues that are sitting there, they're going to dig everywhere, looking for every little corner, nick, you name it. And
Well,
it's not going to end well.
but the hope is, who gives a shit if they're going to look there? Like,
Yeah,
go look.
right.
We've done
Yeah,
it so well here that you can go look everywhere and you're not going to find it. I mean, that's the goal, is like to give them something perfect. But the big part of that is, I think, a lot of the reason why we have been able to take on a lot of this change is, and I say this to your guys that are teams or your guys that have multiple employees and stuff working for them. Most times, none of your guys are maliciously trying to mess something up. Like, they're not trying to, they're like purposely making a mistake. They're working hard. And when you get into a rut and you work hard, you start to miss the forest for the tree sometimes. And it is not because you're being ignorant or flagrant with what you're doing. It's just your focus. And part of being on a team is having the understanding and the lack of judgment when you call one of your other teammates in to say, find something wrong. Please find something wrong here because I can't see it.
right.
Being okay with them coming in and saying, this is messed up, this is messed up, and this is messed up. And these are three things that you worked really, really hard on, right? But I spent the last 4 hours trying to do this to where there were no mess ups, and there are mess ups. In any other business that we've seen around here, that's a demerit type standpoint. Like, you do that 2 or 3 times and you're just gone. And I don't think that that's the right way to go about it. I don't think that fosters any of the openness or the ability to change and find a better way. We went through a whole year where it made everybody like audibly thank the next person for finding their problem. Because
I like that.
the goal is for us to find all the problems, not you to find all my problems, or
Yeah.
me to, but us as a team to find all the problems. So it should be a celebration. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I didn't see this crack and you did. Oh, so good. We can get it fixed. There's the celebration. We can get it fixed. It's not, you piece of shit, you're fired. And it has to be authentic and real, because if it's not, they're going to try, somebody's going to try to cover up a mistake. They're going to pass it to the next guy for it to be his mistake. And that's a terrible, terrible way to go about doing your work. So I say all that, and to working as hard as I can to foster that type of scenario. When we have somebody like you come in, everybody listens. Did your camera just take it down?
Yeah. I'm just gonna flip it and just keep rolling it because where you were going with it was really good. I don't know why. I'm gonna make sure that next time I have you on or have somebody on, this is a little bit more dialed in. But no, keep rolling, man. It's good. They're looking at you. They ain't looking at me anyway.
Well, I think that the thing that I'd stress to you, I'd stress to anybody that has like had a part in founding something and had to hire people to come on and help them do this thing, that there's not going to be an immediate organic transfer of values. And that comes with being very patient with people's mistakes and putting them in a position to make a mistake so that they can understand how you handle that and how they handle that. Because and I know we've all been through this, when you go through and you work really hard on something and you do the best that you can, and somebody comes in and goes, that one, I mean, think about when you had a test when you were little and you busted your ass on it and you're like, man, I studied for 10 hours and you get a D. And it's like somebody kicked you in the stomach. Like, it's personal, and it's a prideful thing that this doesn't need to be like that. Because what we're trying to do is create an environment where people are okay with somebody checking their work. Like, please come look at this because it's not mine. It's going to this customer, and we want to be right. So I know you're really good at what you do, and hopefully you will help me get to that level, and hope I can help you get to that level. So in working in that mindset, I hope that I just hope that we are working. Like, I feel like we are, because my guys have a lot of ability to make decisions for themselves that I trust them with.
Right.
Because they are professionals at what they do. And they didn't start that way. They didn't start as professionals. We all started as guys trying to do something that we hadn't done before. And I think in setting that precedence and mindset from the jump on how we want to bring these people in here, and bring them into our community. It's made it really easy, and it's made it really seamless for an opportunity like working with you 2 years ago to come in and say, this new product is going to do this, 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 and this. And the light bulbs go off of my guys going, dude, this saves me 3 hours, can get it. And not this saves me 3 hours. This saves it 3 hours. Hey, can get it to you a half day quicker now. How awesome is that? Like, that's the celebration. Is that
and better.
Right. Right. That's what I'm saying.
Before too.
Yeah.
So it's not just faster. You're seeing a better
No,
result.
like what I'm getting at is we were aiming for standard here, and it was taking boom, 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 boom to get there. And then we have this new product come in, and it's one, and we're there, right? And we're at that point. And I think when you start to see successes there, and you start to see, I mean, we have it here where guys are coming in and go, hey, I was thinking last night about this and this, and I think if we try this, it'll work. Dude, that's where you're aiming for, right? I mean, that's what you're trying to do as a team is for, when you're paying somebody a salary, you're paying for their hands, but you really want their brain. You really want your ability for them to think about doing more and more and more. Because if you can do that, their hands start to work autonomously by themselves. Their brains working separate, thinking about how to make this better. Because if we can give somebody a product like that oscillating freaking buffer thing or
the long throw DA.
Yeah. Like if we can get them seeing that, and then going, holy cow, if this does this here, I can apply it here, here, and here. Like that's where you start to get the traction. And I'm not saying that it's like this there's guys that are set in their ways and are comfortable with something, and I think that's one of the big probably barriers to change is a comfort level and process that people are used to doing. But if you can go through and show them some of these things, like some of the products that y'all have, and y'all continue to reduce steps. At the end of the day, from an accounting standpoint, time is money. From a process standpoint, the labor hours, the ability to do it at a level, the degree of difficulty to make it happen. If you can start to adjust those down to where it gets easier, faster, and more affordable, those are win-wins for us all the way across the board. I would say for your guys in the field that are coming fixing mistakes.
Yep.
Like it gives them a much higher volume of work to be able to complete, and do it better. And I think that worked for everybody involved. I mean, we've worked with you to find some of your guys in key areas to set up and be out, and knowing that they have that same understanding, we listen to them and they say, hey, man, I use this. I think it was Chris. I think it was the guy's name.
It was Chris. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Chris Mays.
Chris Mays, what's up, buddy? But, Chris
he was in here yesterday.
Have some great conversations about him talking to us about some of the steps and stuff that we do. I'm all ears to anybody that can help us get better. And that comes with doing this right off the bat and saying, how can you help? Because the goal for this as a team is for all of us to come together and make something better. Not for all of us to come together and you be better. It's for all of us to come together to make our product. And if we can do that as a team, that means hey, let's have a really open conversation about how this works. And you say something that sparks me thinking something that goes around. And by the time we're done, we're 10 steps past where we thought we were going to be because we've had the ability and the green light to have that kind of conversation. A lot of this stuff is some more business philosophy things and maybe necessarily be like product related. But I think when you start to look at the ability to accept a new process or to accept a new way to do something that you felt like you were good at, and to be open to the opportunity to go try it, I think all of that starts with creating a culture and an environment that fosters that type of openness. And I know I'll see that at some other boat companies, and maybe rightly so. They do a hell of a job what they're doing and make a ton of money, and they don't need to change them.
They'll have to change eventually when
Well, but you know what I'm saying.
And the rest of everybody else is just setting the bar higher. They're going to have to catch you guys. So,
well, I appreciate that.
My hat's off to you and your team. And like I said, I personally visited your facility multiple times, and I haven't seen anybody with a frown on their face, not once, which I think is speaks volumes of a boat builder as himself. Because, like I said, I've been in multiple factories. So, and, you just explaining the way your management philosophy is with your team explains it right there. I mean, you literally explain why your team is working so hard is because you encourage them to make mistakes and to get better and improve instead of just beating them down. So, I mean,
No, they beat themselves up
that
10
was,
times more than I ever would. I mean, I think thank you. That means a lot. And I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some great people
yeah,
that have the freedom to say, to speak up when they don't agree with something and know that I'm going to hopefully listen. But the all of that philosophy stuff makes relationships like ours work so much better. And
yeah,
it's across the board, to whether it be a new resin or a new glass or a new nav light or a new pleat or any of that stuff, that when you start to see the dots being connected while you're explaining something to somebody, it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting for y'all to come in and I mean, I remember when you were here and Ray was in the back with that freaking DA thinger again. Yeah. But he could sit there and say, like, holy cow. I don't know if you remember him saying that to you, but he's like, holy
yes,
cow, this will cut 2 hours or a day. I mean, I think one of them was like a day out of this process. And I think when, it's got to be exciting for you and your team to have spent the time on this chemistry and this making these things, to go in and like legitimately, it's not a big reach to see how you're. It's not like, let's
right.
take like this really deep dive, find the positive benefit of the things. It's something that, is really short reach. And I think that's what makes what we're doing cool, and even better with the start stuff that your blurred ass is.
I know. You would think that I had my production guys over there could be helping me.
You're like
I'm out of focus, Danny. I don't know what happened.
yeah, you're like one
No,
of the
no, I'm good now. I'm good now.
witness protection shot.
No, well, again, Frankie, man, like I appreciate your time and sharing that information with everyone out there. I think you'd be surprised how many people don't know much about Gelcoat and they're working on it every single day.
Well, I'm not claiming to be an expert on it by any means. There's some of the stuff I said is probably explained wrong, but I've tried to
That's
explain
okay.
it.
Don't let
Sense
us know
to me.
down in the comments below where you were wrong. Trust me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I try to make it to where I can understand it doesn't take a $12 word to describe what's going on. Like you can understand, if once you can start to understand it, you can then start to attack a solution for it. And I
Yeah,
think your guys, I'm sure they have been in that position where, why is this shit still doing it? Like,
yeah,
I know
yeah,
I have. Like,
yeah.
why is this doing this now? And
Mhm.
we didn't even get into temperature and humidities and all that stuff and the constant
Well, that's
change
for the next episode.
of that. But like, I think when you start to get to a point of where you have an understanding of the concept and you can say, if A, then B, then C, you can really start to attack how you deal with the problem and fixing it. Because, man, doing something 10 times in a row sucks. And doing it thinking it's done and then having to come back and do it again, it's terrible. And it makes you look like, and I say this, like, from our standpoint, we go tell a customer something's fixed and then it breaks again. It makes us look like idiots. It makes us look like we
Yeah,
don't know what we're talking about.
it happens to everybody.
It does, but you want to arm your team with enough knowledge and information to be able to go, like, be right like that most of the time. And I think that's one thing that we've tried to do back here, is that when there's a problem arise, like, really talk through the problem, and where we might have been able to make a change. Not me sitting here saying, you do this. Like, do you have any other ideas on how we can do this so it doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
How can you be a part of spot the solution, not just you don't know she were the problem.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I hopefully, and then your guys are welcome to give me a call if they got any questions on this stuff. If I usually,
So how did they find you? Speaking of that,
yeah, I mean,
how
they
do
can go
people
on
get a hold
Explore
of Frankie?
Boatworks. Yeah, you can go to Explore Boatworks Instagram. I monitor all those messages and whatnot. I'm Frankie at exploreboatworks.com. If I do my best to get back to everybody as fast as possible.
Unless it's me, because you see what's the name pop up on your phone when I
Lord
call?
Kenneth Polisher.
Lord Kenneth the Polisher.
Yeah. And everybody that I share your contact info with gets a horrible picture of you and Lord Kenneth the Polisher.
Okay.
Like I froze one of your videos, your mouth in your face in a terrible position, and that's what they get is your contact.
I appreciate the love there, Frankie. And again, I appreciate you coming on our podcast here and sharing some of your
Anytime,
wealth
man.
of
I love
knowledge.
doing this stuff, and I'm for real. If any of you guys ever have any questions, if I can be a help, I'm happy to just shoot us a message or shoot me an email, and we can jump on a call or something and go over any of that. But thank you for making the stuff that y'all make and helping us make a better product every day.
Yeah, no problem. And, some exciting news. I got some more stuff in the works, so just get ready for that. You'll be one of the first few to have it in your hands with the team, because I trust with the kind of feedback you guys give me. But, with that, if you guys are out in the market for a boat, look at XPLOR, look at Delta. I think Frankie there just kind of explains how important quality is to him. And I can tell you that his customer service actually exceeds his quality, just because customer service, I think, is first and foremost, at least in your book, if I'm not mistaken.
And that was, honestly, we didn't get to touch on the Delta XPLOR thing, but that, the stuff that we're all talking about, like, not to go off on another 10-minute rant, but like,
Never.
There's 3 rooms in our plant. There's 2 rooms that we manufacture our part, right? There's lamination and fusion rooms, and then the next one is a rigging room where we put everybody else's stuff on our boat. So those 2 rooms are where like we can really control what we do. And starting the brand Delta Boatworks, like there was not going to be any compromise of that. Like that's why the boats are 100% fully infused. They're all fully cored. They're all 3-piece construction. I mean, you're getting a very custom high-end production material usage, manufacturing, like all those things to ensure that we eliminate all the problems. Boat that has a ton of value to it. And we're super, I'll do a shameless plug at the point, but like we're super excited about, getting and showing people Delta Boatworks and pushing the quality level higher for production price point boats in the market.
Yeah, I think you're going to be a force to reckon with here in the future. So those other boat builders might want to pay attention to what you're doing. So
those other boat builders have been a huge help for me. So I couldn't do it without a lot of those guys. And it's been aside from having kids or getting married, it's been the greatest adventure of my life. So it's been awesome.
Well, Frankie, again, I appreciate you, and let's do this again another time.
Dude, I'd love to, man. And look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, as always.
All right, brother.